All men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father, John 5:23. Trinitarianism would have us believe that this verse means that we should honor the Son as God, even as we honor the Father as God. Kathos. The Greek word rendered even as in John 5:23 is kathos, K-A-T-H-O-S, which Strong's Greek Dictionary 2531 defines as inasmuch as. Webster defines inasmuch, quote, seeing, considering that, since. Neither of these definitions mean exactly like, but rather in light of the fact that. A clear example of kathos meaning seeing that, considering that, or since, is found in Romans 1:28, quote, and even as, kathos, they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do the things which are not convenient. In this verse, God did not give them over to a reprobate mind, quote, exactly like they did not like to retain him in their knowledge. There is no equivalence between the two. Rather, seeing that, or since they did not keep him in mind, he turned them over to a reprobate mind. In the same way, John 5:23 may legitimately be translated, since all men honor the Father, they should also honor the Son. In other words, inasmuch as all men honor the Father as God, they should also honor the Son as the one God sent, John 8:42, empowered, Matthew 28:18, and anointed, Luke 4:18, or as the ERV, ICB, WE, etc. translate it, God did this so that all people will respect the Son the same as they respect the Father. It does not say the same way as they respect the Father. An Old Testament precedent. There is an Old Testament precedent for an action having different connotations depending upon its object. 2 Chronicles 29:20 says, quote, all the assembly bowed down their heads and worshipped Yahweh and the king. This was a single act of worship directed toward both God and David simultaneously. As directed towards God, it was honor rendered to him as God. As directed towards David, it was honor rendered to him as God's anointed. One single action, two different connotations. God's representative. Quote, the Son is the exact representation of God's being. Hebrews 1:3, AMP, NIV, NASB, etc. The American Heritage Dictionary defines represent as, quote, to serve as a delegate or agent for another. A representative is someone other than the one he represents. God does not represent God. God is God. To say that Jesus is the exact representation of God's being is to say that Jesus is not God. God speaks through his representatives. Quote, God, who spake in times past through the prophets, hath in these last days spoken through his Son. Hebrews 1:1 and 2, as translated in CEB, CJB, ERV, EXB, GW, GNT, etc., etc., etc. This passage lists agents through whom God spoke. These agents were God's representatives, not God himself. Quote, in the Son, we have the appointed representative of the Father. Myers New Testament Commentary. Quote, honoreth not the Father because he refuses to honor the Father's representative. Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges. Quote, to dishonor the Father's messenger is to dishonor the Father. Expositors, Greek Testament. Jesus confirmed his status as God's representative in such statements as, quote, "The words I say are not my own, but are from the Father." John 14:10, TLB, etc. The honor we are to render to God, who is the Father, is to respect and revere him as God. The honor we are to render to Jesus is to respect and revere him as God's anointed representative. Kathos means when, not exactly like. Quote, "When, Kathos, the time of the promise drew near, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt." Acts 7:17. The meaning and usage of kathos here comes nowhere close to the idea of exactly like. There is no sense of comparison in its usage. It merely signifies that at the same time that the promise drew near, the people multiplied. Hosper, a Greek word meaning exactly like. Another word translated even as in the King James is hosper, Hosper, Strong's number 5618, which is defined as exactly like. Quote, "For even as, Hosper, Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Matthew 12:40, AMPC, Darby, etc. This means exactly as Jonah was 3 days in the whale, so will Jesus be 3 days in the tomb. Quote, "As I began to speak, the Holy Spirit fell on them, even as," Hosper, "on us at the beginning." Acts 11:15, YLT. This means that the Holy Spirit fell on them just like it fell on us. Quote, "Even as," Hosper, "the assembly is subject to Christ, so also are the wives to their husbands in everything." Ephesians 5:24, YLT, Darby, etc. This means that in the same way that the church is subject to Christ, so are wives to be subject to their husbands. If hosper were used in John 5:23, there would be no question that we are to honor the Son exactly like we honor the Father, equivalently. But instead, kathos was used, meaning that we are to honor the Son because we honor the Father. Accordingly. Conclusion. Jesus was telling the people that inasmuch as, when, since, because, and while they honor his Father as God, they must also, at the same time and accordingly, honor the Son as God's anointed representative.